Alrighty, so up next, I am going to talk about childcare and its influence on socialization with young children. And as the percentage of women in the labor market continues to increase, more and more children are spending time in childcare centers or with other guardians other than their parents. There's a lot of different types of childcare. First, there is care in a child's home, which is when a member of the extended family is the caregiver. This has an advantage of the child being familiar with their environment and the caregiver, and there's a lot of flexibility for parents with scheduling. The disadvantage here is that caregivers here do not have any sort of formal training, and the kids don't get to participate in peer activities like they would at other childcare centers. Next is family daycare, and this is where a caregiver provides childcare from a caregiver's home. Usually, they have a small amount of children, around 1 to 15 at a time. And the advantage is it's inexpensive, it's home based, it's in a neighborhood setting, and kids get to participate in group play. The disadvantage here is that there's a lack of accountability and stability. There's a ton of different childcare centers. First, there's private daycare, which is an independent business and is limited in size, but it's really only available to anyone who can afford it, and it's usually pretty pricey. Commercial daycare is larger in size, and it's usually a national or a regional chain. Because of this, the facilities, the training, the educational activities all tend to be very standardized amongst the different facilities. And then community church centers also provide daycare for kids. The issue here is that the size, the training of the staff, and the facilities will vary greatly depending on the church. Companies oftentimes offer daycare to employees for benefits, and usually they have pretty good facilities and professional staff. Public service centers are state sponsored and funded, and they provide service for low income families. The issue here is that the availability can be very limited. Research centers are usually at an institution of higher education, and it's usually part of the undergrad program where they're studying early childhood development and early education. And then the last option that parents have is an au pair or a nanny, but this is usually only available to families who are very affluent. The average cost for one child in childcare is $500 to $800 a month, which is very limiting to many families. They often will resort to having a family member for childcare, which then makes the transition for children very difficult into elementary school. Parents should really be flexible with the daycare they are choosing for their child. All children can respond differently to different situations. Next, I'm going to talk about parenting styles and how parenting styles, as we all know, can really affect the way kids develop. The first type of parenting is authoritarian parenting, and this is where parents are very demanding and are actively trying to shape and control their child's behavior. They express little affection and restrict emotional expression of their child. Children who grow up like this often are at risk of growing up to be discontent, rebellious, withdrawn, and distrustful. On the other hand, we have authoritative parenting, which is where parents provide structure and direction for their child while still allowing the freedom and the room for exploration and self expression. They have a very high level of two-way communication between the parent and the child, and they promote individuality while still communicating consistent standards. This definitely yields the best outcome out of any parenting style. And kids are usually self reliant, explorative, and content. Next is permissive parenting, which is where parents are very accepting, affirmative, and tolerant of any of their child's behavior. There are very few demands placed on the child, and punishment is rarely used. Here, children are less self reliant, they're less explorative, and less self controlled than children raised in different households. And then lastly, and definitely the worst option for parenting is an uninvolved parent who lacks communication with their children and lacks any sort of affection towards their kid. Okay, Next, I'm going to talk about play and how play affects social development in young children. Play is extremely important in young children, and it allows children to engage with their environments and the world around them. They're able to manipulate objects, they can amuse themselves, make relationships, and make sense of their world while developing a lot of different skills. They say that kids begin play as early as 0 to 1 years of age. Usually, this is called parallel play, where they're not really interacting with others, but they're definitely showing interest and awareness in activities. And then starting at 1 is when there's really a simple social play where children begin to not just observe, but they actually make active attempts to mimic others' behaviors. A huge point here is that culture really affects the way children play. For example, when kids are playing house at home, their concept of what a household looks like really varies depending on their culture. Their idea of a mother's role in a household and a father's role in a household, um, it could change dramatically between where they grew up and how they grew up. Next, I talk about childhood friendships and how important childhood friendships are in development. As children grow older, more of their play involves others, which is the basis of friendship forming. By age 3, kids can sustain play with their peers. Lastly is play therapy, which is the use of theoretical models to establish a process where trained play therapists use their therapeutic powers of play to help their clients prevent and resolve psychosocial difficulties and achieve optimal growth and development. Play therapy can be used with all ages, but is mostly seen with kids age 3 to 12. And since play functions as a mechanism of children to work through their fears and make sense of their lives and their worlds, play counseling is highly effective for young children and is really the primary mode of therapy for them.